Thank you for joining me for another Quick Hits conversation. I'm Dr. Robyn. With me today, I have Domenico Ciarallo, Joe Hayes, and Dr. Wayne Buckhanan. I want to ask the question, how do you tell when you're talking too much and how do you stop doing it? Joe, can you kick us off?
I will do my best, and I'll try not to talk through the entire taping of this because that wouldn't prove any points at all. It would prove that I don't know how to stop. The person might start looking over your head, looking around the room, looking at their watch, some obvious things. The other thing too is that verbally they just kind of stop talking. They stop nodding, giving you the They're there, but they're just kind of, their mind is elsewhere. And I think face to face, I tend to go on further than I do on the telephone, believe it or not. Even though the telephone, there's not a whole lot of cues. But usually the way that I do it is I just kind of catch myself, and it might be a minute or two past where I wanted to catch myself. And I usually, when I'm on the phone, I usually give the good excuse, and it is true, or I say, I think I'm just over caffeinated this morning, and I've been talking a whole lot here. Earlier, you were talking about XYZ. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about that? So I make the announcement.
When I saw this subject, the first thing that came to my mind, being an extrovert person and very talkative person, reminded me of that Greek philosopher says, 2 ears and 1 mouth, listen twice as much as you speak. And I realized that when you're in communication with somebody and your story is going on way too long, like Joe said, you get that body language, you get those ums and those and they're looking over their shoulder and you can hear crickets, and it's time to let go of the stand and let the other person talk.
I just love the idea. That's enough. I've talked enough about myself. Why don't you tell me about me? Sort of moment in the conversation of, yeah, I got it. I like Joe's framing a little better than that, but that was the idea that came to mind. I'm finding that, especially as we talk through this, it's very context dependent, right? If we're in a coaching situation, I'm going to be much less likely to start talking, and I'm going to be very conscious of, am I over talking? Am I talking much beyond asking the right questions and clarifying things? And that's a whole different context than with a student who wants me to keep going about a thing, right? There's a whole different scale of, oh, wow, I can go for a lot longer with a student before I go, maybe it's time for me to stop talking.
I've definitely been in those situations where I feel like, okay, I've said a whole lot and I'm not getting a lot back. But then it's awkward. And I find that here on Quick Hits too, that sometimes I think people realize, oh, wait a minute, we have 10 minutes. I've been talking a long time. Now, how do I wrap this up so I can stop talking? And that's always interesting.
When I first read this question, I first thought immediately of my networking meetings when business people that don't know each other get together and you've got to give your elevator pitch or your little blurb of who you are, what you do as fast as possible. And we all know these situations where you're in a room and one person is dominating a whole crowd of people and it just doesn't seem like letting go, and all of a sudden you start seeing that circle break off. People will start going, oh, I'm going to get a drink, or I'm going to go grab something to eat, and basically the group of 10 kind of whittles down to virtually nobody. But when it's time and people are dominating like that.
Riffing on that idea, I love the anecdote about one of my friends who went on vacation, ended up with a couple that they didn't know, and just did an experiment and listened and did not actually share anything about themselves, but asked lots of questions about this other couple. And at the end, their mutual acquaintance came back and says, yeah, those people love you. They think you're the most fascinating people ever. And their friend's like, we didn't say anything about ourselves. We let them talk about themselves the whole weekend. And we're fascinating.
That's right out of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's 101 of what he speaks about there.
Yeah, let other people shine, pretty much.
So if you're in a situation where you realize that someone is dominating, other than just interrupting, which as a facilitator I will do, how do you tell someone, other than being stop talking. How do you tell them that, hey, give somebody else the floor?
I think it comes in body language. Joe said it perfectly. The things that they do, the way they look over their shoulders, the way they hem and haw, all these little features are ways that you can politely tell somebody, or at least give them a feeling that it's gone overboard and I'm getting bored and I really want to get away from you.
So I think it's tougher. That part of it is tougher. So for myself, I think that I'm okay. Maybe I'll ask my friends, but I think I'm okay at catching myself. But when someone tends to ramble on, whether you're meeting them at a cocktail party or whether it's in a meeting and they've just beaten the subject to death and now are on some different tangent, it is hard to politely interrupt the meeting. If you're heading the meeting, it's easier to say, hey, I think we've explored this topic enough and we're going to move on. Now we're going to move on to the next. But when it's more casual, it's hard to get away from people that just want to keep chatting. I wish I had a good solution for that.
Mm-hmm.
I heard the tactic that I use in meetings, which is circling back to that previous topic and then redirecting, right? Oh, I have a question to clarify about what you said. So they can still have the feeling that they get the chance to talk, but we can get back on track, which may or may not help overall, but at least we can redirect. I don't know that I do that socially. I either let them go. I mean, the current signal that you're done is pulling out your phone. So I don't think I've done that
That's
recently.
harsh.
But, right? Oh, hey, I have a call. Gotta go. You have that excuse to disengage or just pull out the phone and do the thing like, I'm done. You lost me.
Wow.
You better have some good sound effects in your artillery to get away from some of those phone calls or those conversations.
It's on vibrate, so it's all good.
Yeah, I've definitely had situations where I've kind of summarized what the person has said to kind of say, okay, I've got your point. Here's what you said, and want to move on. And then they circle back around it again. And especially if I'm doing a recorded thing, I'm like, I'm going to have to edit that out.
I love the acknowledging that I heard you aspect of that. Like, that may be all they need, is to recognize that, yes, you actually heard what they've said. Other people just like hearing their own voice. You can't tell until you test.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I do feel like, and I wonder sometimes, do people realize that they've made multiple points in a row and not given someone else a chance to interject on any of the points? Like, I feel like ideally in a conversation, you make one point and then you let other people explore that topic.
I would say, just from my history, is I don't think that they do. and here's the reason why. I used to do a lot of meetings where there'd be two people from my company. Maybe we were meeting with 3 or 4 people giving a presentation. And every time I walked out of the meeting and the other partner that was in there with me said, did I talk too much in that meeting? They didn't, because they were aware. The person that doesn't ask that question isn't aware.
And that's feedback you kind of have to give somebody, is you kind of have to be able to say, maybe pull them aside and say, hey, if you'd like a little bit of feedback. Sometimes I ask people, would you be open to me coaching you? I don't want to give unsolicited coaching, but would you be open to that? And people always say yes, even if the answer is no, which is a little bit weird.
I love the awareness. Like, if you keep asking, did I talk too much? They might start potentially asking themselves, wait, maybe I need to ask that question.
Interesting. That would be an interesting option too.
Depending on how self-aware they are.
That is one of the things about, go ahead, Domenico.
I find that what Joe said earlier, a phone call versus in person, I think the in person is a much easier way out, because you might kind of hem and haw on the phone and just the whole time. But when you're visibly bored or it's gone overboard, there's those things where you just walk away from a conversation or a group. And I think that's not so much a slap in the face, but that's the more reality of the situation. Behind a phone or behind a laptop, you're hiding, but in person, it's, you walk away from somebody that really has gone on too long. And I've seen that many times in networking meetings.
Yeah. It took me a long time to realize that when someone says, well, I'm sure you're busy, I'll have to let you go, it meant they were busy and they wanted to go. It took me a long time to realize that as an adult. Silliness. So that is our 10 minutes. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I hope I didn't talk too much. We'll talk to you all soon.